Today, everyone has an opinion, but very few are right. And even worse, most don't even know what they're talking about. We live in a world where opinion has become more important than truth, where people want to be heard without having anything solid to say. But let me ask you, how do you know that what you believe is correct? Why would your opinion matter if it has no foundation? And maybe the most dangerous thing is not that you don't know, but that you are convinced that you do. I found it interesting what someone said, that they disable the comments section because they don't care about other people's opinions. Their work, what they created using their own resources, is not there for everyone to give their opinion on, but for people to learn from it, if they want to. And if someone disagrees, they're free to move on. And honestly, it makes sense. But then the question appears, why do people feel the need to comment on things they don't understand? Why should you deserve to contribute to someone else's work when you have no idea what you're talking about? The real problem is not that people share their opinions. The problem is that they do it without knowing. And worse, they choose to base their opinions on feelings. We've reached a point where people lacking judgment are encouraged by social media platforms to display their superficiality, and others like them continue to support it. At the same time, people who study and present their work, after sacrificing their time, end up being discouraged by this noise. We have to admit that the vast majority of people are uninformed, and the little knowledge they have comes from videos no longer than a minute. The society we live in removes boundaries and tries to blur the line between truth and falsehood so that everything becomes relative. The problem is that we are driven by feelings. We feel like we should be forgiven for speeding. But does that make us innocent? Does a feeling change reality? You can laugh with someone, smiling from ear to ear, and at the smallest word that offends you in a split second, you can end up wishing them the worst. Therefore, feelings are irrelevant in the face of truth. This is where the real problem appears. Because when opinion becomes more important than knowledge, truth begins to disappear. People no longer seek to understand. They only seek to respond. They no longer analyze. They react. And this creates a world where everyone knows, but very few truly understand. I was an ignorant man, but educated in the things I liked. I could express my opinions and seemed more intelligent than I was. I knew how to convince, but I didn't know how to admit when I was wrong. And that is the danger. Because when you think you know, you stop learning. There's an old saying, a clay pot doesn't go to the well too many times, meaning you can carry water with it today. You can do it tomorrow, but there's always the risk it will break along the way. That was me. It only worked with people who didn't know much. But when I had to face people who were more studied or more confident in what they were saying, I was stepping onto a minefield. That's what happened with my faith as well. I would talk about spirituality, but when I was confronted by someone who knew more, I realized that I knew nothing. I could see that manipulation no longer worked, because that person knew what they were talking about. They had studied, and I had a very weak foundation, which, in front of him, cracked. He was talking about Muhammad, about how great he was, and how his teachings were full of wisdom. He said that if I had followed them, they would have changed my life. In contrast to the Christian faith. In other words, he was placing Islam above Christianity, and that hit my pride directly. Not because I was a Christian, but because I felt it as a personal attack on who I am, on my identity, on where I come from. At that time, I had no connection to Christianity. I didn't care. I even mocked those who spoke about Jesus Christ and those who walked around with the Bible in their hands. I considered them weak, and it deeply bothered me that sometimes my cousin chose church instead of going out with me, especially when I had a free Sunday. You see, I was living in my own movie. I saw myself as the main character, as if my opinion and my person mattered more than anything else. Everything was about me. I was the god of my own world. That confrontation changed something. I started to understand that any answer I gave, he could dismantle. He made me look weak, like a child who doesn't know what he's talking about. And in reality, that's exactly what I was. So, out of pride, I started studying. And then I realized something strange. I was willing to accept almost any religion, any form of spirituality, as plausible. But Christianity, that was the one I rejected every time. My parents had become Christians. They studied the Bible, they went to church, and every time they spoke to me about Jesus, I would laugh or tell them to leave me alone. But when someone talked to me about other religions, I was curious, attentive. But over time, I started reading the Bible without any outside influence. And then I realized something surprising. I knew nothing about Christianity. All my opinions, all my beliefs started to fall apart. That's how my life began to change. Slowly, gradually, but surely. The pastor who used to invite me to church, the one I avoided just so he would leave me alone, ended up baptizing me as well. The devil has a clever way of working in our lives. He gives us the idea, the thought of committing a sin. He doesn't tell you what to do. He asks you, what if? Just as he did with Eve. When you accept that invitation, you allow him to influence your thinking. And after you commit the sin, he will accuse you and make you feel miserable. But God offers salvation. I was a lost man, driven by desires that didn't fulfill me, but demanded more and more. But I found out that God loves me as I am. He reached out his hand to me and lifted me out of the darkness I was living in. He took the burden off my shoulders. He forgave me. He cleared my record and gave me a new beginning. I was given a second chance. I wasn't perfect. I still fell. But the desire to change grew. Through the Word, I began to change. Today, I do what is right, not out of obligation, but out of gratitude. Jesus Christ died for me. He saved me. The relationship with God is a journey. Do not be afraid of change. It comes gradually, over time. We fall, we rise, but we do not give up. When you make a mistake, turn back, ask for forgiveness. Rise and continue. God does not reject the one who sincerely returns. We are His children. A child needs guidance, correction, and love, just like us. We must acknowledge that we need Him. We are not independent. He knows better. Do not let yourself be influenced by people. Search. Study. Truth remains, even when feelings change. And if you have the courage to admit that you don't know, you will truly begin to understand. Do not give up when you fall. Get up and move forward. God is with you.